I am currently reviewing every single episode of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. In this video, I'll be covering Season 2. If you haven't seen my Part 1, I recommend you go back to catch up and get an overview of this series. Clone Wars Season 2 is unique for its frequent parodies of other film genres and tropes, including film noir, murder mysteries, and old-school science fiction. Some are done better than others, but in general, Season 2 gives us more creative and intense episodes than Season 1. The animation has also noticeably improved. The character movements are much smoother already, and a lot of the action sequences are very well done. Not the best of Clone Wars yet, but I really enjoy most of the Season 2 arcs. You can recognize the budding potential of where the show goes from here. So, let's get into it. Season 2, Episode 1, Holocron Heist. Following the Season 1 finale, Season 2 kicks off with a Cad Bane arc. I really enjoy how much of a legitimate threat to the Jedi he is. Toto also makes me laugh. The beginning of this episode features yet another situation where Ahsoka follows Anakin's example and almost makes a huge mistake. This pattern was repeated a couple times already in Season 1, but I never totally get bored of it because it feels like Ahsoka keeps growing and is always learning something new. In this case, it's understanding the big picture of a battle and not becoming tunnel-visioned on her mission alone. I loved this moment in particular.
Where's Ahsoka?
Following your teachings.
Is she winning?
For now.
It's a great example of how a funny one-liner in this show often demonstrates some defining quality about our characters as well. Yoda using the Force to know exactly what was going on felt a bit too easy, but I'm a fan of a good heist plot. It was fun to watch Bane and his partners sneak around the temple and outsmart all the Jedi. Also, this episode debuts Jedi holocrons. This concept has great potential, and I love the ways it's been used in other Star Wars stories. Season 2, Episode 2, Cargo of Doom. This episode shows just how calculated Cad Bane is. He always gets away, even with a couple mistakes. And I felt the suspense when Anakin had to decide whether to open the holocron or risk Ahsoka's life. Ahsoka does overestimate her abilities again, but I loved the moment where she's finally the one to keep their priorities straight and calls Anakin out for being impatient. This is what I meant when I said she's really growing as a character. It also shows the close relationship Ahsoka and Anakin have at this point, that she feels she can say something like that and he'll respond well. A solid action episode that shows off Anakin's creative thinking and unstoppable determination. The zero-gravity fight was also pretty cool. The last note I have is that Admiral Yularen was so salty. His intercuts got slightly annoying. Season 2, Episode 3, Children of the Force. We learned some interesting uses of the Force in this episode, particularly in the ways that Jedi can work together, which you don't see very often. 4 powerful Jedi meditate together to discern the future, and 3 of them later combine forces. Forces, get it? Oh my gosh, I didn't even mean to do that. 3 of them later combine forces to get through Cad Bane's resistant mind, which is ethically questionable for sure, and very risky according to Windu. When Anakin is meditating, he immediately sees a place he has an emotional attachment to and hears a child screaming. I thought that was a great detail that felt very fitting for his character, since we know Anakin has only ever had dreams about people in pain and about things that are very personal to him. It's cool to see Mustafar here, and I think it's also important that we can tell Anakin often likes and agrees with the Chancellor more than his fellow Jedi. All these moments of foreshadowing help this show connect to the movies. Speaking of Palpatine, his plan here is so evil, jeez. I guess he never tries again, but this plotline made for a great 3-part arc. It's just so funny to watch Cad Bane trick them and get away again. I'll never get tired of it. Season 2, Episode 4, Senate Spy. This episode focuses on both the romance and the tension between Anakin and Padme, which is both good and bad to me. I want to be invested in their secret relationship, but I am just usually annoyed by Padme as a frequently stubborn and unappealing character. However, I do think the introduction of Clovis creates enough of an intriguing marital challenge to make this a fine episode. I am impressed by how much Anakin puts up with here without completely freaking out. The episode follows a good plot, which is basically a remake of the Alfred Hitchcock film Notorious. Or so I've heard. I'll admit I haven't seen it. Season 2, Episode 5, Landing at Point Rain. Here begins a 4-part Geonosis arc. This first episode begins with some decent banter and sets up the high stakes of this mission. I enjoy all the battle strategy and military coordination. The action is all very well done, with real tension. Not only are the Jedi not winning easily, they are seriously struggling. We spend some time with Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, who comes across as a very calm, honest, good-humored Jedi. Besides those general notes, there are 2 excellent character moments in this episode which I immediately had thoughts on. The first is when Obi-Wan has been injured and his squadron is about to be defeated. He slowly stands up and ignites his lightsaber with a look of determination, ready for a valiant last stand. I really felt for him in that moment, and with just his body language alone, you know exactly what he's feeling and thinking. General Kenobi is a good leader who stands by his men no matter what, even when he's down. This moment foreshadows many future examples in Clone Wars of just how much Obi-Wan is willing to put himself through to protect people. When Admiral Yularen saves them at the last second, Obi-Wan collapses back to the ground, showing how injured and exhausted he really is. Props to the animators here. The second moment I want to mention is when Ki-Adi-Mundi plays along with Anakin and Ahsoka's little competition. Anakin gives Ki-Adi his
Everlasting respect, Master Mundi.
and Obi-Wan says,
That is a gift Anakin rarely bestows, I assure you.
That right there sums up the failure of the Jedi in Anakin's eyes. He can't respect most of them. This line could be played off as just Obi-Wan's typical dry-humored relationship with Anakin, but Obi-Wan is actually hitting on a key truth without fully realizing it. I just love the moments like these that are much deeper than you think, sprinkled through this very good action-heavy episode. Season 2, Episode 6, Weapons Factory. Master Luminara is back, and this time we also meet her Padawan, Barriss Offee. These 2 represent what the current generation of Jedi have been trained to be: formal, logical, and emotionally restrained. A stark contrast to the unconventional duo of Anakin and Ahsoka, who spend the beginning of this episode arguing. Master Luminara is prepared for every outcome and ready to accept fate, even when it comes to losing her Padawan, while Anakin will always fight to control the outcome, especially when it comes to losing someone he cares about. Anakin seems to distrust Ahsoka here, but really he's just afraid of losing her. As Ahsoka is growing up and becoming a more capable Jedi in her own right, Anakin has to learn the hard lesson of trusting his apprentice to take care of herself. Luminara is actually a good example in this way. Even though she might be too detached, she challenges Anakin's dangerous need to be in control. The pacing of this episode was a little slow, but otherwise the plot is good, with a well-planned mission and some fun action. I liked watching Ahsoka spend time with another Padawan who has had very different experiences. I think we see that they're each a slightly less extreme reflection of their almost opposite masters. Season 2, Episode 7, Legacy of Terror. The concept here is a kind of zombie hive mind control, which is pretty creepy as intended. You can see Obi-Wan's genuine fear, and the scenes of them wandering through the dark catacombs, fighting off those dead-eyed bugs, are suspenseful. The episode also continues to develop Luminara's character, showing us how her calm detachment and logic makes her very willing to risk her life for the greater good, but also how that doesn't always work out. Luminara ends up in over her head by committing to the most strategic decision. We get some funny Anakin and Obi-Wan banter, and Obi-Wan's irresistible curiosity about the worms is hilarious. However, the Queen is very weird and a little too over the top to me. Season 2, Episode 8, Brain Invaders. This episode definitely feels like a foreshadowing of Order 66. Continuing the Geonosis arc, the clones are now under the worm's mind control, which puts these Padawans in a very difficult situation. Continuing the themes from episode 6, we get a thought-provoking discussion between Ahsoka and Barriss about who the Jedi are supposed to be, and how radical Anakin is, as Ahsoka says. He's the only Jedi who will actually do whatever it takes to get the job done, and we see proof of that in this episode. Anakin even leans into the dark side for a moment here, as evident from the not-so-subtle Vader theme. While the Jedi's actions in episode 3 were similarly questionable, Anakin definitely took a step further the second no one was there to stop him. We learn more about Barriss's character too. Like her master, she tries to remain logical and is very prepared to die for the greater good, but she also reactively kills one of the mind-controlled clones when Ahsoka would go out of her way not to. Ahsoka clearly goes out of her way not to kill Barriss. I get the intention of the last conversation between Anakin and Ahsoka. It's basically summing up everything we learned about the characters in this episode, but I think it could have been written a little better. Overall, I enjoyed talking about this episode more than actually watching it. I guess I like the individual thought-provoking moments more than its entertainment value as a whole. Season 2, Episode 9, Grievous Intrigue. I had no recollection of this episode watching it this time. Maybe I accidentally skipped it once, but it might just be that it reuses a lot of previous plots. Chasing Grievous, a Jedi captured, Obi-Wan executing a distraction plan with Anakin, etc., etc. It's not a bad episode, just not a super memorable one. As much as Grievous can be annoying to me, I do enjoy the rivalry between him and Obi-Wan, and the way they can predict each other in this episode. They do have another great lightsaber fight. During that close duel, Obi-Wan actually asks Grievous what he gets out of the war, and his answer is the most interesting moment in this episode.
I am not in this war for Dooku's politics. I am the leader of the most powerful droid army the galaxy has ever seen.
What have you to show for all your power? What have you to gain?
The future. A future where there are no Jedi.
This is the only time we actually hear Grievous's motivations and why he puts up with so much BS from Dooku. He really just wants power and hates Jedi, and he's using the Separatist army as a means to his own end. Maybe not the most satisfying answer, but at least this show has given us something, which is a lot more than the movie did. The rest of the action and lightsaber fights are all entertaining as well. I'm a fan of the commando droids and the Magna Guards. We are also introduced to 2 more Jedi Masters, Eth Koth and Adi Gallia, neither of whom are very important, but they do both return later. Season 2, Episode 10, The Deserter. This one takes a bit to get going, but once you meet the deserter and his family, it's a pretty good episode. For once, I'm more interested in the other plotline that isn't the Obi-Wan action. The conversations here really push Rex, and therefore us as viewers as well, to think more deeply about the war and about who the clones are. This episode does a great job continuing that important theme, showing us that some clones really do want a different life, and a few even leave to pursue it. We are challenged to consider the morals of that situation. I do empathize with Cut and his story, but I also appreciate what meaning Rex says he has found in committing to the role he was born for. I felt the suspense watching 2 clones, one of whom is injured, have to fight off 20 commando droids. The bits with General Grievous are just okay. I did laugh when Obi-Wan got surprisingly salty about him getting away again. The droid humor in this episode also made me chuckle more than usual. Another random note, I thought it was cool that they explored a human marrying a Twi'lek and what their kids would look like. It's just one of those creative details that make this show fun to me. Season 2, Episode 11, Lightsaber Lost. I can relate to the anxious feeling of not wanting to tell an authority whose opinion you care about that you messed up. Unfortunately, that isn't really the main theme of this episode. The plot tries to be a fun follow-the-clues mystery, but I got kinda bored. It's mostly scenes that last too long, random characters we never see again, and antagonists that don't feel threatening. I think I'm disposed to like characters that are goofy in the way Master Sanube is, but everyone else was mostly annoying to me, including Ahsoka this time, sadly. Sure, I suppose Ahsoka does need to learn a lesson in patience and slowing down, but I don't enjoy watching her act more immature than usual, especially after I said I felt like she was growing as a character. This was just a one-off moral-heavy episode, and I think you can tell it was mostly filler to meet the season quota. Season 2, Episode 12, The Mandalore Plot. Oh boy, this is a very good arc, and possibly my most rewatched. This is some peak Obi-Wan content, y'all. I love it so much. I think Duchess Satine was one of the best character ideas created for this show. Satine's mere existence adds so much depth to Obi-Wan as a character, which was very needed at this point. Plus, Mandalore is added to the Star Wars galaxy. I find the Mandalorian world and the neutral system politics really interesting. This episode, I think, is one of the best examples of Clone Wars politics done well. It introduces a lot of new information while remaining fun and easy to follow. But my favorite part of this episode is actually the excellent dialogue. The banter between Satine and Obi-Wan effectively conveys the history and the tension between them, with barely anything being said explicitly. In each varied interaction, you can feel that they both really care about each other and yet also drive each other crazy. Pretty much everything in this episode is important for future ones, including Death Watch and the Darksaber, another unique Star Wars creation that I love. The sharp look and the sound design are both really cool and different to any weapon we've seen before. I enjoyed all the action on Concordia and the more creative lightsaber fight. Given the history we learn here, I think it's important to see that Mandalorians can put up a decent fight against a Jedi. Pre Vizsla isn't a surprising villain reveal. You can tell it's still Jon Favreau even under the helmet, but he's a solid villain, with a hilarious name, if you know you know. Season 2, Episode 13, Voyage of Temptation. Oh my gosh, y'all, I cannot get enough of the romantic tension. This episode... This episode has even more political and ideological discussion, which further develops the complex relationship between Obi-Wan and Satine. Somehow their romantic tension comes out in their intense political arguments. Again, the dialogue here is just fantastic to me. Anakin noticing the underlying feelings between his old master and the Duchess also makes all of this even more entertaining. We watch Anakin try to understand what happened between these two, and I think it's so cool that Obi-Wan fully explains what their history is. Anakin even pushes Obi-Wan to admit that his feelings conflicted with his commitment to the Jedi Code, which is a huge deal for him. I love all of Obi-Wan and Satine's more touching, bittersweet moments in the second half of the episode, especially Obi-Wan admitting that he would have actually left the Order for her. This episode is my favorite of Season 2 because it encapsulates why I'm obsessed with these two characters. It's criminal that Satine only returns a couple more times in the show. I could watch them banter forever, and imagining their tragic love story, it just pulls on the right heartstrings for me. Back to the episode. We also see an important example of Anakin's pragmatic, confident, whatever-it-takes attitude in him killing Senator Merrick. Merrick being the traitor wasn't surprising. Anyone who talks like that has got to be the villain, but he's entertaining. The assassin spider droids are pretty scary looking, and there's decent suspense in the cargo hold scenes. But I'm much less interested in that part of this episode, obviously. Season 2, Episode 14, Duchess of Mandalore. The final episode of this arc is actually more politics-heavy, and still very good, but I think it's the worst of the three. While the dialogue doesn't always flow quite as well, there are still plenty of great moments. I enjoy watching Obi-Wan and Satine learn to understand each other's very different points of view. The Duchess just wants to protect her traumatized planet from being drawn into another war, and Obi-Wan just wants Satine to be safe. They argue because they both care, as we've seen throughout the previous two episodes, and I think they both have good points. The plot feels a bit forced with the Senate's quick decisions, but I get that it's supposed to show us how much Palpatine is secretly pulling the strings at this point in the war. You feel the stakes of the situation, and I like the mystery of the tampered recording. I also enjoyed all the action out in the streets of Coruscant at night. That's always a great atmosphere. Obi-Wan really acts like a worried and caring boyfriend the whole time, and it's very sweet. Gotta love the twinning hood disguise. My last little criticism of this episode is that the ending feels abrupt and lacking something. Something like what we got in the previous episode, I guess. Because this is where the arc ends, I just want to feel more closure. However, I do think that the more romantic ending scene fit the tone of episode 13 much better. And I think the lack of closure here is intentional. Satine literally raises questions that Obi-Wan can't answer. So I know I'm asking for a lot here, just my personal feelings watching it. I only have more to say here because this whole arc is so good compared to most of season 1 and 2, so it makes me want to apply a higher standard. I still love watching this one as it is. Season 2, Episode 15, Senate Murders. We're back to a much more mediocre politics episode, and another Padme-centered one at that. She is right that this war doesn't really make sense, but she's just always running into dangerous situations and somehow getting away with it. I like the idea of watching Senate drama and the efforts senators might go to either to win or prevent a vote. So I wish that was the main focus of this episode, more than just a murder mystery. The other main problem is that I don't really care about the characters. It's unfortunate that Senator Farr was introduced in Season 1, Episode 8. This detective character has to be a reference I don't get, so my bad, but he's very annoying to me. On my first watch, I actually didn't see the twist ending coming, so the episode gets credit for that. Season 2, Episode 16, Cat and Mouse. This episode returns to Christophsis and introduces us to the infamous Admiral Trench. He certainly looks creepy enough, and Admiral Yularen convinces you that his tactical genius really is terrifying. Unfortunately, Obi-Wan is just annoyingly bossy again, and it can actually make some smart decisions, I think. I liked the new tactics allowed by the smaller cloaked ship, which I thought had a very cool sound, by the way. I also liked the final lines between Yularen and Anakin, but not much else interesting happens. I appreciate that the episode tries to be more about the mind games than the physical action, but it ends up feeling a bit slow because the psychological action isn't quite complex or engaging enough for me. Season 2, Episode 17, Bounty Hunters. This episode is dedicated to Akira Kurosawa because the plot is taken directly from his film Seven Samurai. This story has been reused a lot in cinema history, but that's because it works. It makes for a solid one-off episode. I enjoyed seeing bounty hunters working with Jedi for once. That one farmer is a bit annoying, but I really like these particular bounty hunters. I just think Embo is so cool. At the end of the opening crash scene is honestly one of the funniest interactions between our main character trio in the whole show.
We can't just wander around aimlessly. We need a plan.
You always taught me to go on instinct, and my instincts taught me to go that way.
No, that doesn't seem right. I think we should go this way.
Why do you even ask for my opinion? You never do things my way.
We crashed the ship your way.
Very funny. I see your sense of humor survived the landing.
It's about the only thing.
There's decently good dialogue throughout this episode. And you know I'm always happy to see Hondo. Plus, we get some truly excellent lines from him here.
This effort is no longer profitable!
Season 2, Episode 18, The Zillo Beast. Continuing with Star Wars versions of various movie tropes, this arc is basically Godzilla, which is cool, I guess. We see that the Chancellor doesn't care about the Zillo until it offers him something valuable, whereas Mace Windu was always arguing to save its life. I liked when Palpatine digs at Windu for sticking to Jedi principles, and Anakin kinda agrees with him. It makes sense that, in response to the Separatist bomb that only affected life forms, the Republic would then develop a bomb that only affects droids and electronics. It also makes sense, however, that using something that overpowered would lead to some unforeseen consequences. An okay episode overall. The people of Malastare are a little annoying to me. Season 2, Episode 19, The Zillo Beast Strikes Back. How about that title, huh? Part 2 of this arc continues to raise thought-provoking moral questions. This is kind of the first time we see Palpatine as Chancellor acting just outright evil, and the first time Anakin is asked to use his relationship with Palpatine. We see Anakin torn between the opinions of Padme and the Chancellor, and actually leaning towards Palpatine's. Good foreshadowing for Revenge of the Sith, I think. This plot is predictable, including the image of the Zillo Beast marching around Coruscant, but it is a cool image, to be fair. The action is fine. I bet there's some Godzilla references that I don't get because I haven't seen it, sorry. The Zillo's death is pretty drawn out with dramatic music. They really try to make you feel for it. I'm not really a sentimental animal person, so the Zillo never hooked me. Plus, I immediately clocked the intended effect of that scene, and that always takes me out a little bit. I enjoyed this arc alright, but besides some of the good character dynamics, I didn't care about the story that much. However, the episode ends on a crazy cliffhanger that only finally came back at the end of the Bad Batch. I'm so glad they did that, actually. I thought it was really cool. Season 2, Episode 20, Death Trap. I'm not really a fan of young Boba Fett, nor do I care much for Mace Windu, as I've said before. I totally get what they wanted to explore in this episode, but it's not super believable to me. Boba just seems like a typical, reckless, emotional kid who somehow infiltrated a Republic military ship, snuck away multiple times without any consequences, and fooled one of the most powerful Jedi at the time. Even with the help of bounty hunters, that's a little crazy. I did like the ending more than the rest of the episode, and I don't mind exploring the perspective of younger clones. The cadets' background dialogue is kinda goofy though. Season 2, Episode 21, R2 Come Home. Still not amazing, but I do enjoy this episode more than the previous one. I'm convinced enough that Anakin and Mace are actually stuck and need help. I like the character of Aura Singh. She's a typical ruthless bounty hunter, always looking for ways to make more money, but she's also very loyal to her partners and seems to genuinely care about Boba at least a little bit. While this guy's a bit annoying, I like the setting of the crashed Star Destroyer. I don't personally care about Mace and Anakin's opposing perspectives on droids, but the concept of R2-D2 adopting Anakin's personality does explain a lot, I think. R2 is very persistent, resourceful, and entertaining in this episode. Season 2, Episode 22, Lethal Trackdown. Mace and Anakin really don't get along very well, do they? I'll admit it was nice to see less of them here after the last two. This episode concludes the Boba Fett arc, and I think it's the best of the three. We are shown a glimpse of the more sensitive, compassionate side buried within this lost, angry kid due to Aura Singh's influence. We really haven't seen much of Ahsoka lately, so it's good to have her back here. At this point, she's much less of a headstrong kid. She's becoming more thoughtful, self-aware, and learning to slow down. It's also nice to have Plo Koon back with her as well. He's always a kind presence, and a good balance to some of the reckless habits Ahsoka has picked up from Anakin. OMG, I forgot Hondo had a thing with Aura Singh. That was actually kind of funny. I like that he just sits back and stays neutral here. I think it's consistent with both sides of his character, his self-interest, and his value for honor. I enjoyed all the action during the face-off on Florum. And that's the end of Season 2. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, consider subscribing to follow the rest of the series. I did get a new mic, so hopefully I sound much better in this video than the last one. I'm really excited to start getting into some of my all-time favorite Clone Wars content very soon. Until then, may the Force be with you.